China's economy has been expanding and is currently the world's second largest economy after the USA. However, recent social turmoil in China makes us wonder whether this superpower country will be able to maintain its title for long, or if this major setback will lead to the collapse of the whole economy. After more than $6 billion in deposits were frozen, social unrest erupted in China. As a result, hundreds of Chinese homebuyers came to protest, refusing to pay mortgages up to $300 billion. Numerous police officers were dispatched to disperse the immense crowd. Mortgage payments on 301 projects in 91 cities have ceased. China is suffering a reenactment of the 2008 recession, but on a much larger scale, as the CCP feverishly seeks to control the growing unease. An entire societal revolt is brewing. Internal government discussions have shown significant stress inside the CCP, with hints that it will only become worse. China's current instability has exposed several weaknesses within the country, and the consequences will eventually affect the rest of the world. Recently, over 400,000 Chinese residents had their bank deposits frozen. When depositors attempted to withdraw money from ATMs, their withdrawals were simply rejected. People panicked when they couldn't even withdraw their own money. It was discovered that the bank freeze was brought about by a major fraudulent operation that lasted over a decade. The protests created a buzz on Chinese social platforms, despite the CCP's attempts to suppress them. While the bank freeze only affected 5 banks, the Chinese government claims that hundreds of other Chinese banks are at risk. The social discontent extended to practically every area of the country after the bank protests went viral. Several major concerns were revealed during a recent internal government property discussion. Construction on 300 million square feet of the property has ceased. The local government feels under pressure, unable to bear the strain. A property fund of 2 to 3 trillion yuan appears to be insufficient. Property sales have dropped by 20%, followed by construction starts, which decreased by 30%. However, China's current mortgage uprising may be the deadliest of them all. Because Chinese homeowners are unable to pay their mortgages, financial offices have devised a plan to allow citizens to put their mortgage payments on hold. The total amount of outstanding mortgage payments is 2 trillion yuan. Both the mortgage boycott and the bank freeze are causing a cascading effect. The 5 banks crashed, which will only extend to 20 banks, then 100, and eventually the entire financial system will crash. The Chinese banking system is based on fractional reserves. When a person puts $1,000 in a bank, the bank will hold $100 as reserves and lend out $900. Because one man's expenditure equals another man's earnings, the $900 will be received as income and deposited by someone else. The bank will now lend $810 while keeping $90 in reserves. The $810 lender will then spend $810. Someone will earn $810 and deposit it at a bank. As a result, the bank will lend $729 while keeping $81 in reserves. This cycle will continue indefinitely, causing the bank to be leveraged up to 10 times. Due to the loan's constant multiplication, this effect is known as the monetary multiplier effect. The money supply in the scenario we looked at began at $1,000 and gradually climbed to $10,000. The multiplier effect caused $9,000 to appear out of nowhere. When citizens try to withdraw their money all at once, they will soon discover that the banks do not have the funds they requested. Years of negligence and avarice contributed to the discontent that resulted in a boycott. Because housing prices in China continued to rise each year, Chinese citizens were ready to buy any available property on the market, similar to how the US recession of 2008 began to develop. Individuals did not even consider the possibility of a housing price collapse. Due to rising house costs, people had to save money for years to purchase real estate. In China, real estate accounts for over 70% of personal wealth, and property buyers sometimes pay in advance for unfinished renovations. This massive buying spree dominated the growing housing market, which lasted for decades. Customers put down a deposit to begin paying mortgages on incomplete properties, This was known as the property presale model. Although it seems ridiculous, this was the case since prospective homebuyers anticipated housing prices to rise more. They were apprehensive that by the time the property was completed, the price would have risen. Hence, home purchasers would take a risk to purchase residences at a lower price. Property developers saw this as an opportunity to grow more swiftly because pre-sales generated revenue for building new homes. Developers of real estate would then use the funds to sell other pre-sale homes with the money from the pre-sale round. This method used 34.5% of these prior sales, according to the Chinese National Bureau of Statistics. While home prices continued to rise, this model performed remarkably well. However, the entire pre-sale strategy failed the moment consumers raised doubts. Homebuyers lost faith in the developers when they started to fall behind schedule. Pre-sale proceeds are typically used by real estate developers to purchase further pre-sale homes. To pay for earlier pre-sale initiatives, they would use current pre-sale income. This tactic, however, might only be successful if fresh investors keep coming in. The plan would cease completing its previous projects if no new investors invested. Similarly, the Chinese real estate market crashed because there were no new pre-sale investments available to finish the current projects. After all, the current pre-sale investments were all used up to finish previous projects. A petition was signed by 900 buyers on social media in late June 2022. The petition concerned Evergrande, the largest developer at the time, who was involved in real estate. According to the Fortune China 500, Evergrande generates $74 billion in revenue annually. Presale homebuyers requested the local government in the petition to stop making mortgage payments if Evergrande did not continue construction within 3 months. At the time, Evergrande didn't think of it as a big deal, but the movement eventually expanded to 301 projects in 91 cities. The boycott started in Henan province, before expanding to numerous other areas. Banks are already notifying mortgage payments that have not been made, even though the 3 months have not yet ended. China has been attempting valiantly to control the movement, but this has only served to fuel its growth. The protest is quite unusual because, previously, Chinese citizens have paid off the majority of mortgages. Additionally, banks have a legal right to request and receive full payment. The government has been taking action to control the economy by reducing the interest rate on mortgages and temporarily granting residents the right to stop paying their taxes, along with lowering the prime rate for 5-year loans from 4.6% to 4.45% in May 2022. Additionally, the CCP has lifted limits on lending to real estate developers and ordered an increase in money printing to combat inflation. However, this management was ineffective, and there's no chance projects will ever finish since the property developers lack the funds to repay their debt now that the scheme is exposed. The CCP tried every deceptive move to contain societal hysteria, but they just made things worse. Protesters gathered on July 10th outside 4 community banks that had $5.9 billion in frozen accounts. The government has promised to reimburse residents for losses of up to 50,000 yuan, $7,500, in reaction to the protests. Due to a false sense of security, the majority of people put their whole life savings. Government insurance is supposed to cover bank deposits up to 500,000 yuan, but it excludes forgery schemes. Depositors in the banks in the Henan province were deceived by Henan, New Fortune's owner, who is accused of forging loans and transferring money unlawfully. He would simply take the money for itself rather than loan it to the citizens. The deposits were not eligible for government insurance because the action was dishonest. However, this raises the issue of how the general public would know which banks to rely on. Due to the current situation of banks, no international investors want to invest in China's economy. The number of Chinese junk dollar bonds below 20 cents also doubled between June and July. China is working to reduce all COVID cases to zero. Due to its strict COVID regulations, Wuhan recently discovered 4 asymptomatic COVID cases and 1 million locals were locked down in shelters. Considering their objectives, the CCP has gone crazy. David Sachs, a venture capitalist, thinks President Xi is the source of this craze. Perhaps President Xi is delusional as a result of the CCP's achievements over the last few decades. Dictators have a history of making awful decisions on their own. Control of Taiwan was threatened during his most recent meeting with Biden. China will protect its national sovereignty and territorial integrity over Taiwan, Xi assured Biden. This suggests that China is attempting to keep international businesses off its soil. The results of this are already evident. Jeep recently shut down its sole manufacturing plant in China as a result of CCP meddling in its operations. The CEO of Stellantis, a company in the automotive industry that owns Jeep, described how we've noticed an increase in state intervention in China's corporate world over the past few years. Volkswagen and GM, two of our major rivals, are well established in China. I would not desire to occupy their position. Even Chinese citizens are starting to question their Chinese citizenship. Jack Ma, along with a reported 10,000 affluent Chinese citizens, with a combined net worth of $48 billion, intend to leave China this year. Despite the enormous obstacles, this movement is continuing. These obstacles consist of obtaining official approval, a visa from the other country, and gathering the documents. The real estate market is reaching new lows with the economy deteriorating. The desire to flee China is not shocking. The desire to flee China is not shocking. Evergrande, the most indebted real estate developer in the world, missed its deadline for its debt restructuring plan. It had months to prepare, but according to sources, the business hasn't even begun. Evergrande cannot restructure its debt in any way. They can keep selling more properties, but who will buy them? No one will put money into them if they try to raise it, and no one will purchase their brand new pre-sale homes. In addition to having an excessive number of vacant homes, China's population is also rapidly declining. The population decline in China is due to the implementation of restrictions on the maximum number of children that a person can have. After the one-child policy went into effect in 1979, Chinese families were only allowed to have one child each. In 2016, the two-child policy was implemented because it became clear to the administration that their population would drastically decline. In China, the fertility rate just fell to 1.15 in 2021. For you, it needs to be 2.1 to sustain your population or replacement level. With every generation, the population drops by 40%. It's possible that within the next 10 or so years, China may experience a demographic collapse. China is currently facing a number of significant problems, but if the government played its cards well, all of them would eventually find solutions. The government is shifting back toward a more socialist structure, which historically has been disastrous for economic growth. At this moment, there's no way to preserve the Chinese economy. The Chinese economy is about to experience one of its biggest collapses ever. In the event that social dissatisfaction intensifies, the public may rise against the CCP, which would put China in a dreadful situation. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be notified of our next videos, and I'll see you in the next one.